Pauline. Welcome to HR Heroes.
Thank you, Molly. Lovely to be here. Thank you for asking me.
No problem. Really excited to have you today. And I know we discussed this before the call, but very well colour coordinated and in matching outfits for the episode today. But yeah, I guess I'll kick off with the first question, which we always ask, which is why HR?
Yep, why HR indeed. Sometimes I ask myself this at night time. No, I'm only joking. Like probably most of your guests, I didn't know about HR when I came into HR. I completed my degree and I went into some customer services roles. And it was within one of those roles, there was a restructure at the company that I was at, and I was nominated onto the staff forum. And within the staff forum, we had to consult with HR. And it was in that time that I was like, what is this role? Who are these people that they're talking on behalf of the business and, you know, consulting with us and taking in our ideas and really listening? I felt really listened to by HR as part of that staff forum. And it was as part of that process, we were able to save some jobs and go into those people as the staff forum to say, it's okay, you're not at risk anymore because of everything that we put forward on your behalf. Was such a fulfilling thing for me personally. Me as a person, I really love to help people. In my personal life, I've always been this way. I love helping people and doing good things. So I was like, yeah, I think I want to be in HR. And I was about 25 at that time. And I've been really fortunate enough to be in some really large, well-known organisation where I've really honed my skill on doing one thing really well for a long time, like onboarding or contracts, and then move into the next role where I've been more of a generalist to now kind of startup, founder-led startup companies where you see the whole cycle. So I think what still drives me, what got me into HR, and what still keeps me here is really, it's really varied, like that the role of HR, as you know, because you speak to people from HR all the time. And I think if you're not in HR, you can see it as it's a really fluffy department or discipline, but it's really not. You have to know, especially if you're a generalist, everything from tax to compliance, to engagement, to law, to organizational structure, to talent. There's so many things you need to know about that it's actually really evolved me as a person. And I don't think any other discipline, I love what I do. I love my job. And I don't think any other discipline would have given me that breadth of skill. So that is why I got into HR and why I still love HR.
Yeah, no, I love that, Pauline, as a story. I think it's so interesting what you've raised because I've only been in the space for like a year or so now, directly kind of working with HR professionals. And what I find so interesting for me personally is exactly what you said. I was never really exposed to the scope of what the role entails until I was actually meeting directly with HR professionals who were explaining kind of all of the different hats that they have to wear on a day-to-day basis. And like you say, until you're actually in a meeting or in a room where HR are kind of leading the show or kind of the people that you're speaking to directly, you might not actually be aware of what the role entails. And there is, unfortunately, I think still a bit of a stigma around kind of who HR and what HR do. But it's interesting to know that you kind of took the approach of like learning each individual sort of discipline and then actually using that to build kind of a holistic skill set when it comes to HR.
Yeah.
You enjoyed the most?
The thing is, not everyone has that route, and I'm not saying that everyone has to have that route, but that really has excelled me where I am today to be at a senior level, because I learn how different organizations did things. So best practice, what's the best practice way, and how to scale processes in a really good way. And when you're specializing in different areas of HR, you get very quick at them. So when you go into a startup where you've got all these things happening, you need to be quick at the processes like referencing or contracts or policy writing. You need to be very quick at doing those and knowing where to spot inconsistencies, or if there's a policy that's wrote that isn't for the employee, that's a bit standard and it's not going to be engaging. I can really spot the language to say, who is the audience? Remember, the audience is for the person. You're not writing it for you, you're writing it for them. So let's make sure that it is that something they can digest. So I think that really gave me a really good grounding. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to have that, but it definitely helped me working with specialists, because in those big organizations, You have a head of employment law, a head of learning and development. And as a generalist, you can spend time with those people to really like work with them and learn that expertise. But yeah, in a startup, I would say one of my biggest growth was when I worked for a company, and it was at the time of Brexit. And that was a whole new thing. Like, how do you, with the pandemic is another thing, but how do you deal with Brexit? I mean, that was something that we had to deal with. We had to open an office in Amsterdam. We had to get everyone legal right to work. There was so much that was going on that no one in HR would have faced at that time either, a bit like the pandemic. So we're always faced with new things, and people just expect HR to know the answers. So yeah, I've seen, you know, real growth in across my skill sets.
Yeah, it's really interesting, I think, that approach, because I'm from a startup led background originally, although not in HR, more from the commercial function side of things. But it's really interesting that you say that actually you can start in these maybe larger, more corporate businesses that have these specialist departments to really learn and hone kind of those different areas. And then actually it makes you more consultative, doesn't it, when you go into a startup led environment, like you say, where things are extremely fast paced and the founders can make a different decision tomorrow, and you sort of have to pivot and like decide what the priority is and kind of mold yourself to that, to have that depth of understanding to be able to apply it at the day-to-day level. But interesting as well, like you say, I think HR, again, like you are almost firefighters for entire businesses, in the sense that actually all of this has changed and it's sort of all left to HR to deal with and to kind of lead the charge with, and to come up with policies and to come up with how you're going to motivate and retain people when things are changing in such a fast-paced political environment as well, when it comes to things like Brexit. So yeah, it was interesting again that you're never really the face of it as such, but kind of doing all of the work in the background as well.
100%. And a lot of work that goes on in the background. And I've seen like some of your episodes where people were saying all the work that had to go in with the pandemic. And, you know, we're at home frightened for ourselves and families as well, but we're out there on the front line, making sure that everyone is supported. We have policies in process, that we're taping the office. So, you know, you have the social distancing. And I think, yeah, those little things that all add up to how businesses can continue to be productive. Like sometimes people forget what goes on behind. So yeah, I just find it really rewarding. HR it's always changing and it's always busy, and I love to be productive and busy.
Yeah, and I'm sure people always keep you busy as well on a day-to-day basis. But this might kind of tie into quite nicely the advice that you've already given, but you know, in terms of being able to perhaps have a specialism in HR, or maybe to be more broad with it and then funnel into something that you love, for example, or to be more consultative. But what's one piece of advice that you wish that you'd known or that you'd give to someone starting out a career in HR?
Yeah, I've got a couple of pieces, because I think this part is really important, the advice bit. And one of them is that, like, if you want to go into HR because you have a perception that like it's easy and, you know, HR always talking to people and doing fun initiatives and organizing socials, I just want to say HR is hard. I can't tell you, Molly, the amount of times that I've cried at home because of something that has happened at work, where you have to put on a brave face and then you come home and, you know, we are real people. Like, the decisions sometimes HR have to execute or communicate is not necessarily the decisions that we would make, but we are the spokesperson of many companies. So it is hard, and you have to move fast. It's not somewhere where you can go, I'm just doing this job. You have to think on your feet, and you have to take all perspectives in consideration. So you need to look at the business, but also the employees. And I've seen a lot on LinkedIn about people like saying HR is just for the business, and it does make me angry, because that is not the case. Like, HR is not just for the business, but we work for the business, as does everyone else. So there is always going to be, if you're told to do something, you can advise the risks and not to do that. But if the company decides, no, this is what's going to happen, you may have to execute that. So I would say, number one, think about your decision, and if it's right for you, because it is hard. And number two, if you get that job and you're going into HR, the first thing that you should do is speak to people. You should speak to everyone, not just like, if you're going in as a head of, speak to senior leadership. You need to speak to everyone, and you need to ask them the same questions to get a view of where the company is. Do an audit for yourself. Even if you're not a senior level and you're just a junior, you should still speak to people to find out for yourself what is going on. Like, what do people think of HR? What do people think about the business? What's it doing well? What's it not doing so well? So then you can tie the dots together. You can connect the dots and try and think of initiatives that are going to drive the best outcome. And that would be my third piece of advice, is that when you're asked to do a project, and this happens very often with like smaller companies, especially, they say, we want a skills framework, deliver that in a month, or we want this. And very much, because most of us are people pleasers, we go, oh yes, we'll do that. And we do this 6-month piece of work. And then you forget to ask yourself, I didn't ask the CEO, what is the outcome they're trying to get from this piece of work? Because if you knew the outcome, maybe the skills framework wasn't the thing that you needed to look at. Maybe it was actually, it's not the skills framework people want. It's more conversations with their leaders, one-to-one discussions. And then you could have saved yourselves 6 months by doing the thing that's going to drive the outcome for the business and the employees. So I would always say, think of or ask the question when someone's asking you to do it, say to them, what is it you're trying to get from this piece of work? What is the outcome that you want from this? What are we trying to solve? And when you take those questions, it drives your strategy and it drives what you need to do to get there.
Yeah, love all of that. I mean, outside of even just being like, advice that aligns with HR professionals, I think anyone in any business who's joining a new business could take that advice and run with it, because it's really valuable. And I think all 3 pieces of advice that you gave tie quite nicely into that idea of, as a HR professional or someone working in the people team, you are that linchpin between the business and the people. So whether that's in some cases, unfortunately, maybe being the scapegoat or the spokesperson in some scenarios for things that you might not believe in but have to deliver the news, whether that's a case of actually understanding the business as a whole and how you can impact that business from doing your research, and whether it's the right business that you want to be aligned with in terms of like the goals that their board might have. But then in the third one as well, I guess it really is like, I think often it's go and do this project, like you say. And when I speak to some professionals in HR, I ask them from our perspective, from an employee engagement platform, well, what's the reason behind this project? Why is employee engagement important, for example? And often people don't actually know the answer because they've been tasked to do it, but haven't actually asked the questions behind how this is going to help the business.
Yeah. And also with the engagement piece, it's so interesting because some businesses you would say, do you want people to be engaged? Is that what you're driving? Do you want people to be happy and engaged? Or do is if you are saying to them, we're going to pay you really well, but we just need to make sales because we need to be profitable within a year, then be transparent and honest about that, to say, look, we will give you good salaries, good career development because we're going to be building at scale, but we're not going to have the best perks and there will be things that are amiss. But I think like that, companies can't just say we want good engagement and we want good this if they don't know why. Why do they want that? Yeah, they need to know the why, and we need to know the why behind it, and we can advise and consult better on if that is exactly what we should be concentrating on. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and helps you, I guess, as a team to be able to drive strategic initiatives within your department, right? So if you know employee engagement's a focus and the reason for that is because your retention is lower than you would like it to be, then actually it's okay, well, I know that the way that we're going to get engagement in line for the people and what the people have said in their engagement survey, for example, around wanting more benefits, aligns quite nicely with the business's goals to drive retention. So actually tying the two together, and you are actually often the only person or team in the business that actually gets both perspectives.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. And on that note, then, kind of where do you see, like, this is sort of where HR sits now and the advice that you'd give to someone starting, but where do you see the field of HR heading? And I suppose this probably is going to be quite difficult to answer in terms of how quickly things do change in the space, but where do you see the field of HR heading in the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, and this is probably the hardest one because I can speak to you for an hour and a half about where I think it would change. So I will tackle a couple of areas because we haven't got an hour and a half. So I think we couldn't have predicted the pandemic. There are lots of things that are changing, so we can't predict some things that happened. But I think if you look at what's happening in the world, the way our kids are being brought up, the way music's changing, the way learning's changing, everything is being more data driven. And I know, you know, the scary word AI, but it's not just about AI, it's about technology. And it's about, if we consider like the evolving workforce, so we've got all the generations, but if you look at the next generation, which my daughters fall into, is that generation alpha. Now, generation alpha, my daughter, her homework, she does read books, but her homework is all on interactive apps, all of it. Spelling, times tables, and just maths fluency. And it's just amazing because she does her homework on these apps really quick at them, and I look at them and I go, like I can't even get to grips of them. And then when you think about her going into the workforce, technology is not just going to be a tool that they go, oh, have I got this tool? It's going to be an expectation, because that is what they've grown up with. And we need to consider what people are growing up with. You know, baby boomers, not so much. We need to upskill ourselves. But the new generation coming in, who are going to be business owners, customers, employees, they're going to expect this. So I think that the biggest change is that HR needs to be more data driven, which is something I'm upskilling in as well. Luckily, I have tools that give me the data rather than me being on spreadsheets and VLOOKUP. But organizations that fail to introduce this seamless kind of tech-driven experience, they're going to really struggle to engage with workforces and to keep that talent. So that's number one, is like the tech angle. And number two that kind of drives into that is kind of more personalization, is the fact that people are more demanding. Am I allowed to even say that? But people are more demanding. Like, they have questions, like they want to be communicated to all the time about what's happening in the business, why they're doing a certain project. They're more, from when I was starting work, people are more vocal about what they want and what they need. So HR, when we're building onboarding experiences, learning experience, career progression, or even engagement initiatives, I think it needs to be more personalized, because otherwise people will go to TikTok or they'll go somewhere else to do that learning, because people are hungry for answers, to be communicated, to be upskilled, to be the best they possibly can be. And I think you can see that trend, and the trend is picking up, but in 5-10 years time, this is going to be the norm. So I think where it comes to, like, you know, like the Woolworths and all those companies that kind of closed down, Blockbuster to Netflix, organizations really need to be like looking holistically of like, yes, we need to drive success in the next 12 months, but what else do we need to do to set ourselves up to scale and to really make sure that we're, you know, helping our people the best way we possibly can and keeping them engaged?
Yeah, I mean, again, really, really interesting. I think that innovation piece is really important, isn't it? Whereby it's looking, like you say, almost everything moves so quickly now, whether it's, like you say, people being able to access information through the likes of TikTok, or you can get anything at your fingertips, but it's also looking as a business ahead for how quickly things could change. And if you don't innovate, unfortunately, you probably will be left behind, because you're not, like you say, being kind of, what's the right word for this? Like, you're not keeping in line with the trends and the landscape happening. And the other piece, the data-driven piece, is really important as well, right? Because that's going to enable you to have a finger on the pulse for what's changing and what those initiatives might be that are coming up that you need to prepare for, or, you know, how you need to change with the workforce. Because that piece as well is a minefield, isn't it? When you've got 5 different generations all wanting different ways of working, communicating, existing. But equally, like you say, that's going to change soon, whereby it's going to be predominantly a younger tech-led workforce. But interested to know from you, you mentioned that you don't have to sort of do that yourself in terms of kind of getting the data and following insights. Is there any tools that you use at the moment, or technologies that you would recommend to people?
Yeah, I mean, we integrate with a lot of things. So we obviously have a HR system that gives us all the kind of growth databases, etc. And then we have a benchmarking tool. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the companies we use, but yeah, we have like a benchmarking tool where we do all our salary benchmarking, which is really great, because we are really a transparent organization and we want to become even more kind of transparent. So not only do we like send out our comp strategy and advertise our salary bands, but internally we want to like, and externally we want to say these are our salary bands, this is why we pay this band, etc. But that also shows our gender pay gap and all of that data. So instead of me trying to work out what the ratios are, it's all there for me. So we use that, and obviously we are a learning and skills platform as well. So in regards to like skills gaps in our organization, HowNow, we know where our skills gaps are, and we know what we need to do to progress to be proficient and get promotions, etc., in our roles. So I think it's all of that tech. You don't have to have tech, but I think if you don't have the tech, it can be so time consuming for a HR department. And really to have a kind of seat at the table, as you know, the C-suite, they don't want you to just go to them and say, well, I've got a hunch that like people aren't really happy, or, I don't think we're paying right. You have to have data to back it. And they'll be asking you, how many companies have you benchmarked against? Where is this data coming from? And this is where the data is coming from, because you can put your hand up and say, I know this data is true and I know it's good. So it just stops that kind of worry. As for me, who uses that tech, I rely on that tech. It makes my job really easy and seamless, so I can concentrate on more strategic things than trying to work with spreadsheets for my whole day, which I have done, by the way. So it's really evolved in like such a short amount of time.
Yeah, using that tech to empower you and your team rather than replace you and your team. It's there to like facilitate what you're doing. And like you say, it's powerful to have data, because no one can really argue with black and white statistics or data you can pull. And I think the other piece that's really interesting about HowNow and that sort of open and honest communication that you have is there's a book called The Engagement Bridge by Glenn Elliott and Deborah Corey, and they speak really openly about open and honest communication as being quite a foundation of a successful business in terms of people being able to understand, trust, and have that open communication within a business as well. So obviously that's really important. But I always find it so interesting as well with you, Pauline, how you obviously work in HR tech, but equally utilize other HR tech. So it's interesting that you kind of reap what you sow as well from that perspective.
100%.
Fantastic. Okay. And then I guess my next question then would be, and again, leads on quite nicely. What's the best cultural initiative that you've seen implemented across any business? And I'll preface it by saying that this can be something that you've implemented yourself at a previous business, something you've seen in a previous business, or it can be, a brand or an organization you've seen that have done something really well.
Yeah, and there's probably loads of examples. So I'm going to choose two that I saw the biggest impact from. And the first one, it was like join the team CEO. So basically what that was is the CEOs are very busy people, but the CEO of this company spent a couple of hours every day with each team. And this was really important, because what this showed, and what you get in organizations, is the CEO or the C-suite speak to their senior leadership team, who might speak to other managers who speak to their teams. And if there is a blocker or something happening on this level, the expectation is that will be filtered up and sorted out. But sometimes the CEO or the C-suite never hear about this. So when he spent time with the teams, he came out of that and said to me, I didn't even know this was going on. And he was like, and it's nothing to do with like the senior leadership doing a bad job in kind of giving that information up. It may be that they just didn't think it was that important because they had like dissolved it or unblocked that blocker. But the CEO needs to spend time with the business to really empathize with the people, and for the employees to go, the CEO knows what I'm talking about. Like, they understand me, they see me, because in organizations that does really, really get lost. And you working in engagement, you know that connection to goals, but the connection to the CEO, who ultimately is the person who's the visionary. They're the ones that go out and talk about why this company is so amazing and, why you should buy it. They're the storytellers. So they should have time with the employees to really engage and make them feel, yes, I know it's not just because you need to make 5 million ARR. It's because the ultimate goal is to help people, or whatever the ultimate emotive reason is, that is what's going to drive performance. Because another example of this is one of my friends was saying she went to a conference, and at the big conference, work conference, the CEO was saying, we need to make 10 million ARR this year. And my friend said, I came away from that and I was like, that did nothing for me, because yes, you're making 10 million ARR. I'm glad you're rich. But what does that mean for me? It means I've got more hours. Now, if you would have spun that and said, it's not about just making our ARR, it's about helping organizations with our probates, because they were a law firm, probates or pro bono efforts. I think you need to really remember who your audience are as well. And remember that the people working for you, they work for you because they love what you do. I hope people love, the mission of the companies that they work for. That's one where the CEO work with every team. And the next one is more of a learning spiel, is that at HowNow, because I love it so much, is that we do something called Knowhows every month. And what that does is anyone from the business can do an hour training session online and talk about something they know how to do. And that can be meme making, yoga, breathing. It might be something more about presentation skills, but it gives people an opportunity, number one, to get together, because it's really nice to see people get together. Number two, to share like some kind of learning, some kind of knowledge, and pass that on. And also to present, to help with their presentation skills, and get used to, the more you present, the more you'll be more comfortable with that. And I think it's really engaged, especially HowNow. We've been doing it for 2 years every month, so a lot of topics. But we record them as well. So we keep them on a channel of ours that everyone can relate back to. And it just encompasses that philosophy of continuous learning. Like, we're continuously learning, not just work things, but other things, and really digesting what all of us are really about. So I really love that. But there are so many more, Molly. But those are two that I wanted to pick out.
No, I know how. That's fantastic. And obviously the words as well, and I think that continuous learning from your peers as well. I think often, like you say, learning and development is very much focused around developing in your role specifically, or kind of in the business specifically, but being able to kind of pick the brain of someone outside of your department, or to learn about a specific area, maybe like you say, if it's how to use social media, if maybe you're not familiar with that and you have your own side business and you want to to be able to kind of hone in on those skills from your peers, and to give people the opportunity to have a voice and to speak out is great. And I think the other one you mentioned in terms of the CEO getting to know everyone, again, I've worked for startups and big corporations, and I think in those sort of organizations where there is a flatter structure, where maybe you're sat next to the CEO on a day-to-day basis, or maybe you can see him in the office, he's visible, he's accessible to everyone, you do always feel more connected to the mission and the values of the business, don't you? Because like you said, you're really getting kind of FaceTime with the person who's driving it forward. And I think your other point around actually how you frame things and how you introduce business, because at the end of the day, we're all working for businesses, right? Businesses have corporate goals, they've got revenue goals, they've got, cost targets, etc. But actually, it's like, how do you connect the wider mission to all of those things that we have to tick off to land with everyone else, so that everyone feels engaged and that they're working towards one common goal? So love that as well. Are they both from the same business? Are they both?
No. Because in HowNow, the CEO sits right with us. So we know him very well, but in a larger organization. And it was his initiative, actually. And it was lovely, because he was like, no, I'm going to sit with everyone. And he took the time out of his diary and he did it. And it was such a positive effect, and relations were like born from that. Like, people just felt more comfortable approaching him after that, which I think is really good, that people feel that, there's no, it doesn't have to always be a hierarchy. We're one team striving towards one goal, no matter how big the organization are. So no, that was a really good initiative.
Yeah, love that. Helps him as well, right? Because then he knows exactly how to get the most out of people and to get his bonus or his goals or whatever it might be. Or
definitely.
Or her, if obviously there are CEOs who are females as well outside of that example. But yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I mean, Molly, I could have spoken to you for honestly for so long. It's really, thank you so much, because it's so easy to talk to you. You're a great host. So it's really good. Like, the conversation flowed, and I've really enjoyed it, and hopefully it's helpful to anyone listening, within HR or who's looking to get into HR.
Yeah, perfect. And what I'll do is I'll share your tag on LinkedIn as well, so if people do want to connect, if you're all right with it, to ask you further.
Yeah, I love that.
Then they'll be more than welcome to. But yeah, thank you, Pauline.
Yeah, no problem.